Society, as we know it today, seems to depend on, if not entirely thrive, on conflict. If you look at history as it's recorded, it's largely the history of conflicts of interest between different nations, different ideologies, different religions. And if you look at all of our mediums of entertainment, everything as we know it seems to be dependent on the idea that there is some kind of conflict of interest. In our sitcoms, for example, we do not watch people who are living completely happy lives, but we watch people who live their lives constantly at odds with each other, constantly coming up with new ways to be in competition, to prove one's own rightness over another person's. And so, in our reality television programs, you hear very often that the people participating in these things are required or asked to create drama, create conflict between each other, because that is, for some reason, what we find interesting. We like to watch scary movies. We have a government that budgets most of its money on war and so-called defense. And without conflict as we know it, how would society function? Because if there was no conflict, if there was no violent crime, we would have no need for prison systems, we would have no need for, or much reduced need for police, reduced need for lawyers. There are so many systems within society that need conflict, and without it, they become completely obsolete. So, I want to propose a theoretical here. Suppose that society has a change of heart, and there is a complete cessation of violent crime, theft, and you see a lowering of conflict worldwide. You see no more need for shows like Maury. You see no more need for conflict of interest between politicians, because theoretically there's no more need to argue over the correct course of action, because the correct course of action becomes obvious. And not just on a political scale or spectrum, but also at a humanitarian level. We start to respect each other and realize that violent crime doesn't really solve any solution, or doesn't really solve anything most of the time. So, what does this then do in this ideal? Because this is the ideal, you know. What a policeman should want is that he can go out and he doesn't need to arrest anyone. What a lawyer should want is that he doesn't need to defend anyone, because no one needs to be defended, because no one is, committing any crimes or feels any inclination to do something to harm other people. Shouldn't this be the ideal? I mean, obviously, yes. But the question has to be asked, what then happens to all these professions that are dependent on the idea of conflict and dependent on crime. You see, the paradox of society is that it cannot function in its ideal state. If it were to achieve its ideals, then it would have to change completely. So this is opening up a lot of doors for new ideas of how you can, allocate the necessary resources to people if they're not working. A lot of people like the idea of a basic income, something that is paid to anyone regardless of whether they're working or not. And I do think that may be a step in the right direction. I mean, given how things are working right now, it doesn't seem at all likely or possible to me that things will remain the way that they are. If technology continues to progress, if humanity is able to embrace some sort of sense of ethics, then things as we know them have to change. So I'm not really proposing any course of action right now, but as I see it in popular media today, there's no one asking the important questions that I think really need to be asked, which are, where are we coming from? Where are we going? Do we really need to have any more wars, given that most wars are fought over acquisition of resources or land? There would be no reason if everyone's needs are met. So we shouldn't make the assumption that we ever need to have another war, really. Nor should we make the assumption that everyone needs to be working a job, because that assumption is going to inevitably come into a lot of conflict with itself, because, as is made obvious by the fact that prison systems and police would be made mostly obsolete if there's no conflict in the world. And many jobs today are starting to become replaced by technology. So, as long as we're attached to the idea that everyone has to be working, that things are going to function in the future just as they have in the past, and as long as we're not open to alternative ideas, then I think that things are going to get progressively worse.